Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's Mr. Lamine again. Welcome back. Lecture number 5. Hope you're all doing well. Miss y'all a lot. Going a little crazy here. Still haven't shaved, as you can tell. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. A few of you have reached out. Ran into Quinn the other day on the rail trail. That was nice. Always good to hear from those of you that I have heard from. Super appreciate that. Hopefully, you guys are staying safe and staying sane. I am doing the best version of that I can. I have not driven my wife crazy enough that she's kicked me out of the house yet, so all good there. Hopefully, same with all of you. A couple of changes coming into today's lecture on part 5. It has been reiterated to me and the teachers that we need to really make sure we're trying to keep down the amount of work we're giving you, and I am trying my best to do that. So I am going to split this up into 2 parts, where today has about 4 content slides. After the first 2, we'll call that part 1. Then we'll do the next 2 and call that part 2. I'm going to upload it all as one video. If you want to knock it all out at once, feel free if you have the time. But I'm going to assign it in smaller chunks. That way, you guys don't feel overwhelmed or have too much stress or anxiety or anything from this class. Hopefully, you guys are still watching this. I know grades are a little different now. You may have noticed if you've checked the grades, which please do, but if you've checked the grades, that everything was moved from the 4th 9 weeks to the 3rd 9 weeks. Now there's nothing on the 4th 9 weeks. Words going around from the school, from some of your teachers about how grades are going to be going forward. And for some of you, that means you probably will never ever see this video and won't be doing much work going forward. But I encourage you all to continue to stay engaged, keep using this time as an enrichment time, get the knowledge and the information that you need going forward, so you know what's going on when you start your history class next year. And just for general information, because this stuff is fairly important. We're about to fight a civil war. I am going to keep making these videos. I am going to get us all of the content through the end of the Civil War, which we need to, which has been my goal from the very beginning of the year. I'm going to make sure those videos are up for you, and hopefully you get a little something out of it. But, reach out, let me know if there's anything I can do to make things easier for you, if I can make class easier, less stressful, more informative, right? I would still love to feel like I'm actually valuable to you and society and whatnot, instead of just rotting away on my couch all day. So feel free to reach out, let me know if there's anything I can do for any of you guys in any way, shape, or form. And again, check those grades. Make sure that if you're getting work turned in, I'm getting you the credit, nothing's falling through the cracks, stuff like that. Lastly, a little bit of news here I've hinted at. Wanted to announce to all of you, and for a few of you really rub it in, that I can now officially announce that my wife is pregnant, and it is, we've been told it's a boy, and I have been given permission to name my future son Henry James Clay Lamine. So in all of your faces, especially you Calhoun lovers, it's happening. There's going to be another Henry Clay in the world. So that is what's been going on here. Maybe that's why my wife hasn't kicked me out yet. I don't know. We'll see. But he is due in early October, so it has been a extra stressful time here. But enough about me. We're going to go ahead and move on and get ourselves a little bit of United States history here. We're getting really close to the Civil War. Was going through making those slideshows today. Super excited to bring that to you. But before we get to kill 750,000 Americans, we need to get through our last few events that lead us to secession. So before we get started, as usual, let's do a super quick review just for those of you who have been with me and need a little refresher. Talked about 4 different things last time, most of it fairly violent, starting with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the law that repealed the Missouri Compromise. I should have put compromise instead of act. I don't know what I'm doing, but it repealed the Missouri Compromise, opened up Kansas and Nebraska to popular sovereignty, where those territories will decide their fate, not based off of Henry Clay's Missouri Compromise, but based off of the votes of the people who live there. So, of course, that floods Kansas with people from the North who want to make it an anti-slavery or a free state. And with those border ruffians from Missouri pouring in, wanting to make it a slave state, all those dastardly people from Missouri. And so, of course, violence erupts in Kansas. We call that time period Bleeding Kansas, with the most famous incidents being the sack of Lawrence by the pro-slavery Missourians, and then the retaliation by John Brown and some of his followers, mostly his sons, when they hack people to death with a sword. He will be coming back just to prove how crazy he is later on in this video. Next, we have the caning of Sumner, where a senator, Charles Sumner, is beat not quite to death, but pretty dramatically with a cane by a man named Preston Brooks, all because he gave a speech called The Crime Against Kansas, where he said that bleeding Kansas and this influx of pro-slavery people to try to turn the state was a crime and a travesty. And so, after attacking Preston Brooks's cousin, Andrew Butler, in the speech and the state of South Carolina, this man showed just what a gentleman he was and beat poor Sumner nearly to death. The last thing, going to be pretty important going forward, my Whig party, the old Whigs, they are dead and buried along with Henry Clay. In their ashes, out of their ashes, rises the Republican Party. Their primary stance is that slavery should not expand. A lot of the people in the party are anti-slavery, but officially the party platform is, hey, you can keep slavery where it is, you cannot expand it. That obviously not going to go over well in the South. So the Republican Party only in the North for the most part. And then the other party that comes around, at least for a while, eventually these people end up in the Republican Party, but the other party, at least for a while, is the Know-Nothings. They are anti-immigrant, they are anti-Catholic, they are hardcore anti-Irish, anti-German. These people that are coming into America, these know-nothings, are a rising force. This nativist party is a rising force in the 1850s. Eventually, though, of course, they don't, as most third parties, it will collapse, and most of their members will become Republicans. So, moving on to what we have today. Really 3 topics, 4 slides, 3 topics. First 2 we're going to do here on part 1, and then the next 2 we'll call part 2. I have all of section 3 between this video and the next one. So most of section 3 today, a little bit of section 3 on the next video in the next week or so. So the final straw, Lincoln and secession. The last few events in the mid to late 1850s that lead the South to finally say, that's it, we're out. We are going to form our own country. What are you going to do about it? So, the first of today's topics, really the only of today's topics, if you are going to do this video in 2 parts, is the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott is one of the most famous Supreme Court cases, or infamous, really. A lot of Supreme Court historians today will tell you that this is one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court ever made, and I would agree with those historians. It is a Supreme Court case called officially Scott v. Sandford. It is about a man named Dred Scott, pictured right here, Dred Scott. He is a slave. He's born into slavery, and he is a slave. He is owned by a doctor who is in the U.S. Army. And as many of you know, if you are in the U.S. Army, you don't get to pick where you live, and you don't live in one place for too long. You have to move around. So when Dred Scott and eventually his wife, Harriet, when they were owned and enslaved, they lived in all of these different places that you can see here on the map. Many of them very solidly in the slave South, right? Southampton County, right? We talked about that before. That was where Nat Turner's Rebellion was. King George County, right down in, we got Louisiana here, Alabama, Missouri, right? Definitely slave territory. But he also had been taken to the free North, most notably, you can see here in Illinois and what is right now today known as Minnesota. So he has lived in the North. And because of this, he eventually sues for his freedom. His owner dies, and the ownership of Dred Scott gets passed on. And when it does, he goes to his new owner, this older woman, and he says, I would like my freedom. I would like to buy my freedom, even. I would be willing to pay you to set me free. And his owner says no. So he says, all right, fine, that's fine. I'm going to sue you for my freedom. And he sues in the state of Missouri, where he is currently living now at this time. And he sues under the auspices of saying, hey, I was taken to the free North. I lived in the North for a while. I lived where slavery was illegal. Therefore, I should have my freedom. He's not the first slave to do this. In fact, a number of slaves had sued in the state of Missouri for this very reason, and they had won their freedom. And Dred Scott's case goes up and up and up and up, and sometimes, a few of the times he loses, and they say, no, you're still a slave. And other times he wins. It says, no, you're right, you should be free. But eventually his case makes it all the way to the Supreme Court, where this really sad-looking man, Roger Taney, I know it looks like Taney, but it's Taney, he's the Supreme Court Chief Justice, right? He's one of many, one of 9 justices, but he's the leader, and he is the guy who is going to spearhead this decision, this case, and the Supreme Court, with an opinion authored by Taney, rules against Dred Scott and says, no, you're a slave. Now, what they could have done, is they could have just said, sorry, we can't hear your case because you're not a citizen, right? You're a slave, therefore we can't take your case. The Supreme Court did something very similar to this with John Marshall and the Marbury v. Madison case, right? Well, we talked about what seems like forever ago, when the Supreme Court said, sorry, Marbury, we'd love to say you're right, but we can't hear your case, right? It's not legal for us. Supreme Court could have done that here, but Justice Taney, Chief Justice Taney, decides he's not going to do that. He is looking for an opportunity to make a ruling that is going to settle the issue of the expansion of slavery once and for all. He is trying to calm the storm that is going on in America, right? We're in 1857. We've been talking about event after event after event since 1819, right? When Missouri first applied for statehood, that's the first time the lid really kind of started to come off the pot. And Taney's been watching this. He's been around for a while. Heck, he served Andrew Jackson when Jackson was president. So the dude's been around, right? You can tell, like, he's not young. He's been around for a while, and he's watched the pot of water that is the tension in the United States just boil and boil and boil, and he's afraid of what's going to happen if nobody intervenes. This is his chance to intervene. So he makes a ruling, a very sweeping ruling, where first he says, I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, you are a slave and you cannot sue because you cannot be a citizen. In fact, any person who is of African descent cannot be a citizen of the United States. Can't do it. Right? Pretty far out ruling, and really not historically accurate. I mean, when the Constitution was adopted, when the United States became its own country, there were a lot of African Americans and freedmen that were citizens of the United States. And somehow Justice Taney looks at that history and ignores it and says, no. The founders never meant for you people. This is a country, as he will say, this is a country of white men. And if you're not a white guy, then you're not truly American, which is horrendous. But he takes it even further, and he says the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. Now, I just said that we've repealed it, but Justice Taney, Chief Justice Taney, doesn't care that we've repealed it. He doesn't care that we took that beautiful line that Henry Clay drew right over here, and he says you can't do it. You cannot, Congress cannot make a prohibition on the expansion of slavery. Right? What he is saying is Congress cannot regulate slavery in the territories. In fact, really what he has done is he has said things like the Republican platform of no expansion of slavery. No, that's illegal. You can't stop the expansion of slavery into the territories, right? At this point, it just says into the territories. But things like popular sovereignty, Missouri Compromise, the Republican platform, those are all now illegal according to the Dred Scott decision, right? Because Justice Taney here has his horrendous quote saying things like African Americans, that's added, free or slave, could not be citizens of any state because they are inferior. They are of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, right? This ruling is quite openly white supremacist, super racist, and even at the time, not going to be super popular. But on your activity sheet, which you will be turning in shortly after part 2 of this, lecture 5, I'll tell you when, what I want you to do, add to it real quick, 2 parts. First off, just summarize the decision for me. If you're a little confused, if my explanation wasn't great, feel free to consult an outside resource. I try to do the best I can to distill all of the information down right. If you go, I'm sure I haven't looked at it in a long time, but if you go to the Dred Scott Wikipedia page, you're going to get a ton of information. I've tried to distill it down, but if I haven't done a great job, that's fine. Let me know. I'll try to clean it up going forward, but summarize that for me. How do you think the North viewed the decision? How do you think the South viewed it? Based off of your summary, right? Just knowing what you know about the North and the South, how is each region going to feel about what old sad sack Taney here had to say? Then, if you're a citizen, if you're a political party, like the Republicans in the North, what could they do to a ruling like the Dred Scott decision that they disagree with, right? Or even today, what could we do? The Supreme Court is the highest court, right? There's no one to appeal to. What they say is the law is essentially the law. What can we do at that point, right? What can we do as citizens? What can we do as a political party if there's something the Supreme Court has said that we as citizens disagree with? You might want to pause it, consult another video, Wikipedia, Better Teacher, Mr. Betts, I don't know. He does have a great one about Dred Scott. It's to Bismarckies, Just a Friend. So if you want to go check that out to help you with your summary, feel free, pause it now, and then we'll get to the second slide, which will be the last one of part 1 of lecture 5. Very confusing, I know. All right, so let's get to the effects of Dred Scott real quick. First off, if you guessed the South was going to like this, you'd be wrong. They loved it. They, especially guys like John C. Calhoun, who's thankfully dead at this point, they've been arguing, led by dudes like Calhoun, for a long time, that things like the Missouri Compromise were illegal, unconstitutional, couldn't do it. They've been saying, ever since they came to regret the compromise, they've been arguing that the compromise that they made was unconstitutional, right? Little weird to make a deal in 1820 and then start to say a few years later, you know that deal we agreed to? Yeah, I don't just like it. It's illegal. We have to get rid of it. But that's what the South has been saying, and that is what the Supreme Court has now agreed with, that you cannot stop the spread of slavery into the territories. So the South loves it because what they've been told is, hey, guess what? Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, Utah, all of the South, all of that territory, if it's a territory, is now slave, right? The North, obviously, is going to hate it. They are, if the South is paranoid that the North is trying to kill slavery, the North is paranoid that the South is trying to perpetuate it indefinitely and spread it everywhere. In fact, their fear is that today, Taney said, you can't stop the spread of slavery into the territories. Tomorrow, he will be saying that all states have to recognize slavery. And I don't know how far-fetched it was. I don't think the Supreme Court would have gotten to that point, but the way the North viewed it, nothing was ever enough for the South. And the argument that Southern slaveholders made, and I hate having to use all these S's because my lisp is terrible and I can't stand to listen to myself now anymore. I'm going to cut my tongue off because I can't keep it behind my teeth. But what the North sees is that the South is making this argument of, hey, this is my property. You can't tell me what to do with it. You can't tell me where I can't take it, right? If you're a northerner and you own a horse, you can take it anywhere. Why can't I move to the north and bring my slave with me? And the North is afraid that the South is going to continue to use that argument. And before you know it, slavery is legal everywhere. Is that likely? Probably not likely, but doesn't matter if it's likely or not from our viewpoint. It was the next domino to fall from a northern viewpoint. So Taney, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, and the new president, a man we're not going to talk much about, thankfully, James Buchanan, they thought, done, settled, issue, good. But we also thought that after the Missouri Compromise, we thought that after the Compromise of 1850, what would make this different, right? So now, even though Republicans in the North, even though they're saying, hey, elect us, we won't let slavery expand, even though that's illegal, technically, it's much more popular than it was before. Because what happens every time the South gets something they really, really want? It scares people in the North. And people in the North who used to not care, used to be apathetic, used to maybe even kind of support slavery, or I mean, at least as if you guys did that writing activity, where the historical fiction writing activity, and if you read through some of those choices of people you could be, you would find that pretty much all of them were horrendous, right? A number of you like to pick, like Lily, right? You picked the one person from like Boston that was a newspaper editor that wasn't human garbage, right? You Lily, you picked the one person that was a good person. And even on that description of a historical character, what did it say at the end? Your neighbors hate you, right? So most people in America at this time were, by our moral standards, towards non-white people, horrendous, right? They weren't great by our standards, right? Looking at it from 2020. So even those people who in the past were like, well, whatever, slavery, whatever. I read Harriet Beecher Stowe's book. It wasn't that good. I couldn't understand anything that she was writing because of her writing style, right? You guys understand that if you've done all the activities. Those people were now starting to say, wait a minute, this is getting too much. And so more and more people are voting Republican, even though technically that is illegal. The Democrats in the North are running on a popular sovereignty movement. That's now illegal too. They don't care. They're still saying that is the best way to decide this, right? Instead of letting it spread everywhere, instead let it spread nowhere, let the people vote. Now, we've tried that. Right, Stephen A. Douglas, this is your baby. We've tried that. It led to John Brown hacking people to death with a sword. That does not discourage Northern Democrats, apparently. And Stephen A. Douglas is going to keep his baby alive, if only barely. So now in the South, as is always the case, they think they've won. It backfires with Northern opinion. And so then they get more radical. And in the South, the secessionist movement, right, the movement of people who are saying the answer is to secede. The answer is to become our own country. That grows in number, grows in popularity in the South because, once again, right, this happened with the Fugitive Slave Act, right? The South says, hey, we want a stronger Fugitive Slave Act. We won. We got it. The North goes, we hate this. They rebel against it. They ignore it. They don't follow the law. They protest the law. And then so the South gets more radical. And that's what happens here. So once again, we have people who go, hey, we're going to solve it. Theoretically, they've solved it, right? According to the Supreme Court, the law is the law. Popular sovereignty is illegal. Blocking the expansion of slavery into the territories is illegal. It should be settled. Not settled. Far from settled. Making people in the North more radical, making way more people in the South more radical. Secession, much more likely. If you are only going to do part one for today, which is all I'm assigning, you're done. You're done for today. You should not turn in your activity sheet yet. I've lost the words. You should not turn in your activity sheet yet. You will do that at the end of part two. If you want to knock this whole thing out right now, you can continue. If not, you're going to want to pause it and remember where you're at, and then pick up from this point Moving on to part two, right? Debates, weird debates. The only debates you'll really, no, about the only debates you'll ever learn about, other than maybe next year if you take 11th grade, Nixon v. JFK, going into the 1960 presidential election. This is not even for a presidential election. This is a series of 7 debates, my lisp is killing me, in Illinois in 1858 between a man who we've talked about before, Stephen A. Douglas, this guy who, yes, this is our second guy this year who looks like Jack Black. Weird. I don't know what that's about. Although here he's wearing a lot of rouge, along with a much taller man that you've definitely heard of, named Abraham Lincoln. Right, this guy, the old rail splitter. There is a considerable size difference between these two. Stephen A. Douglas is very short and rotund. He's a short, stocky, powerful man known as the Little Giant. Little because he's not very tall. Giant because dude was pretty smart. He is running for Senate for re-election. He's been in the Senate for a while. He's been in politics for a while. He came up with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. He was instrumental to helping Henry Clay get the Compromise of 1850 passed. So he's been around for a while. He's made a name for himself, kind of made a mess of things, but he's pretty famous in Illinois, running as a Democrat. He is running against a very unknown political entity, a man named Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln has been a lifelong Whig. All right. His idol was Henry Clay. So, if you guys think Lincoln was great, then you're admitting that Henry Clay was great because Lincoln said Henry Clay was great. Lincoln was a lifelong Whig. He has changed to the Republican Party now that the Whigs are dead. Lincoln, a man whose views are about to change radically on slavery and on race relations. At this time, not great on race relations, right? He's still kind of a super racist, white supremacist. A lot of that's going to change, thankfully, going forward. If you ever see people putting out quotes from Lincoln that sound terrible, most of them come from these debates. Most of them come from the 1850s. He was a man of his times. He's going to get far ahead of his times here soon. But he has 2 years' experience. He served 1 term in the House of Representatives. That happened to be during the Mexican-American War, where he was super against the war. Now he is against the expansion of slavery. And he is running for U.S. Senate in 1858 against Stephen A. Douglas. And they go around Illinois, 7 different spots, and they debate. Now, these debates, there is still a form of debating today called Lincoln-Douglas style, based off of the way these two guys went around the state. But they go around and they would debate for about 3 hours each. Right? They would get up there and they would talk for a long time. You would get to go. Lincoln would go if he was going first. He would get to go for an hour. Then Stephen A. Douglas would get to go for an hour. Then Lincoln would go for a half hour. Then Stephen A. Douglas would go for a half hour. So you're looking at 3 hours of people right here standing outside listening to these guys talk and talk and talk, right? Some of you guys can barely get through 20 minutes of my video. So, these people are just much better talkers than I am. But they would go and for about 3 hours, they would debate each other. Now, obviously, what's the main issue going to be? Slavery and its expansion. Douglas is going to be up there hammering pro-popular sovereignty. We have to let the people decide, right? This is America. How are we going to decide everything? We are going to vote on it. Is that legal anymore? Not according to the Supreme Court, but Stephen A. Douglas doesn't care. Lincoln is going around saying, I will not let slavery expand. Now, Illinois is in the north. It's never allowed slavery. It's a super racist state. Lincoln gets hammered by Douglas because Douglas continually says that Lincoln is pro race mixing, meaning that he would be fine with intermarriage of the races, which to us is like, okay, yeah, who cares? But it was a huge deal. That was like the biggest fear of people was white women marrying non-white men. Like that was one of their biggest fears in America at the time. In fact, it doesn't become legal in the United States until the 1960s. It's going to be a long time. the intermarriage and the multiracial children and people that we know today are very new in American culture, because for a long time that was super looked down on. So Douglas kind of tries to tar Lincoln with this super progressive view on race. So Lincoln has a lot of quotes from these 7 debates. He talked for a long time. He's got a lot of quotes that do not sound good to our modern ears when it comes to race. But what he is saying again and again is, we should not let slavery expand, right? Slavery is wrong. You should get paid for your labor. People shouldn't own other people, and that it's just not as good economically either. And what's really important from all this is Lincoln doesn't win, right? Lincoln, he wins the debates, right? He makes a name for himself. He makes the race much closer than it probably would have otherwise been with a weaker candidate. He loses the seat. He loses the election. But even though Douglas wins the seat, Lincoln has now made himself a career. He has launched into fame. His name is going to be in these newspapers all over the North. Hey, look at this guy. Listen to what he's saying. He makes a lot of great points. He makes a lot of points very beautifully, right? During these debates is when he utters phrases like, a house divided against itself cannot stand, right? The nation cannot remain half slave, half free. So he gets invited to go around the North on speaking engagements. He goes around the North giving speeches. People learn. Literally, no one knew who Abraham Lincoln was. Most people in Illinois didn't know who Abraham Lincoln was going into 1858. And if you know where the story is going, 2 years from now, he's going to become president of the entire country. That's how important these debates are. They launch him into the stratosphere of inside Republican circles, which means in the South, people are going to learn who he is, and they're going to be horrified by this tall, gangly guy and his views on race and his views on slavery, which really at this time could just be summarized as, don't let it expand, right? It's not great. Lincoln would say, I would love to see slavery go away. I'm not going to do anything to make it go away. I just don't think it should expand. That is going to make him, to the South, the Antichrist when he gets elected president here in 2 years. But none of that would have happened had it not been for these 7 debates with the little giant, old Stephen A. Douglas. Not the last time these two guys are going to face off. But for the last slide, for the last bit of new content we have today in this video, John Brown's raid. The lunatic is back. John Brown. He's been laying low. He's been laying low since he helped or ordered people to be hacked to death with a sword in the North. But that massacre at Pottawatomie Creek has made him infamous, has made him famous, has given him credentials among the abolitionist movement, especially the hardcore ones, because what's more hardcore than chopping people to death? So John Brown hatches a new plan. He wants to do something again. But it's got to be big, right? And it's got to be much bigger than just murdering a few dudes in Kansas, right? It's got to be bigger than trying to make one state a free state. Let's free all the slaves. Now, to do that, we're probably going to have to do it violently. And so John Brown starts to hatch a plan where he is going to go into the South and he is going to start a rebellion. He is going to arm slaves and he is going to help lead from the mountains. This was going to start in Appalachia, where people could hide in the hills and hollers. And he was going to help start and lead a rebellion that was going to lead to the end of slavery. John Brown, very religious man, feels like this has been his purpose, right? He has been sent by God to free the slaves. So by God, he's going to free the slaves. Goes around and raises a little bit of money. There are some rich dudes in the North who secretly fund him with some weapons and give him money to rent a farm in Maryland where he can launch his assault. He tries to get some famous people involved with him, like Frederick Douglass. He goes to Frederick Douglass and meets with him in Chambersburg, PA. And Frederick Douglass goes, "You're crazy, man. No, thank you. I do not want to go on a suicide mission." But John Brown takes a small number of followers, again, including some of his sons, right? He had 19 children or so. Keep forgetting to look that up, but I'm pretty sure it's 19 children from 2 different women, and rents a farm, Maryland, right along the border of Virginia, what is now the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. A lot of you guys probably heard this story in West Virginia history because this is all going to go down in the small town of Harpers Ferry, Virginia. So here's the plan. And John Brown, some people debate whether he thought this actually had a chance or not. If he thought it had a chance, he was crazy. If he didn't think he had a chance, then he was crazy like a fox. Either way, his plan was he was going to sneak into the small town of Harpers Ferry, Virginia, here in October 1859, and he was going to attack the federal arsenal, meaning the government has a storehouse where they store a bunch of weapons, and they also have a bunch of machines where they make weapons. A lot of the guns that are about to be used in the Civil War, made right there in Harpers Ferry. He's going to attack, surprise attack, grab a bunch of guns, grab a bunch of weapons, then he's going to disperse them to the slaves that were going to hear about this and flock to him. That's his plan, right? It has about a 0% chance of going down successfully, so he's either crazy or he's crazy like a fox. Now, he sneaks into, right? I mean, you can look at the beard and you can be the judge. This is the small town of Harpers Ferry. If you ever get the chance of visiting, I highly recommend it. It is a fantastic historical site to go visit. But as you can see, there is the arsenal here. There is the armory here. There is this bridge with the Potomac River underneath, and the train tracks that run across. So John Brown and his men, mostly sons, are going to come across into Harpers Ferry on the night of October 16th into the morning of October 17th, and they are going to launch their surprise attack. Now, unfortunately, the first person who is shot and killed in this is going to be an African-American man who is caught on this bridge. They're sneaking across, and they see a guy. It's nighttime. They don't know who he is. They hear a voice. They shoot him. Oops. Not off to a great start, but the armory and the engine house where he's going to end up holed up in, they're not expecting what, I mean, we would call this man a domestic terrorist or a lunatic. They're not expecting this small group of guys led by one of the most fantastic beards in history to show up and try to steal the government's guns. So at first, it starts to work. Brown gets in to the engine house. They get in. They take over the armory for a while. They send some guys off into the night to go to some nearby plantations to free some slaves, to try to spread the word, to try to get people to come back and help. But very quickly, the alarm is raised, and the John Brown and his guys at first they stop a train. Right? You gotta cut the telegraph wires. They cut the telegraph wires, and they stop the trains, right? No one's getting in the town. No one's getting out of the town. But eventually, they decide they're going to let one of the trains go through. So the train goes through, crosses the Potomac, and what's it going to do? It's going to go to the next town. It's going to immediately stop. It's going to spread the word. Of course, they have a working telegraph line there. So the word gets out very quickly that some small group of lunatics is trying to take over the armory, trying to take a bunch of weapons from the U.S. government. Now, it is going to be a colonel by the name of Robert E. Lee, who leads a number of Marines and U.S. Army to take on and eventually take down John Brown. They hole up inside the engine house where there is an extended siege for a while. People firing in, people firing out. John Brown's has a son killed. There's some townspeople killed. There's a number of raiders killed. There's some military personnel killed. It's not good. But eventually, Lee and the military are able to subdue Brown and take him into custody, where he is going to be put on trial and found guilty of treason. But treason against the state of Virginia, which is not really a thing, but that shows you treason is just when you are guilty of betraying your country, right? You're a traitor. You've committed treason. But Virginia is not a country, it's just a state. But that is how far the South is gone, to where they're saying, hey, you didn't betray the United States, you betrayed the state of Virginia, the country of Virginia, essentially. So he's captured, and he and his cohorts that were not killed are all going to be put to death by hanging. They're going to be hanged. Now, John Brown becomes a hero in the North. You can see here that there is, this is from a northern paper that says all true Christians who believe in immortality through Jesus Christ alone are requested to pray for John Brown, who is under sentence of death and is to be hung next month for righteousness' sake and doing justly with his fellow man, his country, and his God, by request of one who loves the truth and feels for the man that is to die a martyr to it. Right? A martyr, right? He's dying for the cause. That's what that means. If you're a martyr, you're dying for something larger, for something that you believe in, right? This is a term that Christians would use for early Christians, especially, right? Christians who stood up to the Roman Empire, or the Roman emperor, who said, you're not allowed to be Christian. You have to be fed to you have to change your religion or be fed to the lions. And they said, feed me to the lions. That is what they're saying, essentially, John Brown is doing for the cause of abolition. So in the North, he becomes a hero. When he dies, church bells toll all across the North. One of the most famous, one of my favorite songs from the era but one of my favorite songs from the era that the Union Army is going to sing. It's called John Brown's Body, and it talks about how he's a great dude. He's a martyr. He died for the cause. He died for righteousness' sake. So obviously in the South, he's going to be a traitor. He's going to be a villain. He, like I said before, we would use a term like terrorist, lunatic, psychopath, unhinged. A lot of nothing positive would they have to say about John Brown. But what's going to be worse for the South is the difference in their reactions, right? Can you imagine? Think about it this way: if someone tries to do something that's going to get you killed, right? And that's how these Southerners are thinking, right? If John Brown was successful, hundreds of thousands of white people in the South would have been killed. Men, women, children, right? It would have been like Nat Turner's rebellion on a grand scale, right? Instead of 56 whites being killed, it would have been 56,000, 560,000. That was John Brown's plan, right? That's his plan. He's going to free the slaves violently. I'm going to give you guys guns. I'm going to give you guys pikes. Then we're going to go on a killing spree. So the people in the South are thinking, not only did this guy try to get us all killed, try to get my children killed, try to get my wife killed, not only did he try to do something that was going to cost me my life, but my own countrymen think it's a travesty that he's being hanged, think he's a martyr, think he's a hero, right? Look at him. People acted like he was a saint, or he was going to become a saint. In fact, John Brown eventually decided that his mission on earth was not to end slavery through violent means. It was for him to die for the cause, to become a martyr for the cause, to further that cause. In fact, it was said that he was going to make the gallows, right, where you go to be hanged, he was going to make the gallows as glorious as Christ made the cross. Right? People are equating John Brown with Jesus in the North. Right? Not everyone, but enough. So you can imagine that if, someone today attempted to pull off a terroristic plot that would have killed everyone in Morgantown, but they failed. And then everyone in Pennsylvania thought that dude was awesome. You can imagine going, okay, not only do I not like this guy, this terrorist, but I don't feel safe living next to Pennsylvanians, right? What is wrong with what is wrong with these people? I'm American, you're American. We have disagreements, and your hero's the guy who failed at getting me killed, right? So you can imagine, you can see where, you know, these reactions are wildly different, and because of this, we're going to lead to further sectionalism. And at this point, right, we're in 1859. All of this started 40 years ago in 1819. We've had event after event after event after event, and the South essentially feels like we're not safe in the Union anymore. This isn't a great place for us. The only people we can trust are those people who think like us. Those people in the North, most of them, enough of them, clearly don't. This is not a great place for us. This is not a safe space. We got to maybe really seriously look at getting out of here. Now, my question to you, last question before you turn in your activity sheet. I can never remember what it's called. Your activity sheet. How do you view John Brown? You know, sitting in your chair, in your bed, in your fake classroom. How do you view John Brown? Was he a nut? Was he, on a hopeless mission? Is he a hero? I mean, this is a guy who said, "Here's what I think is right. Because of that belief, I have to act." And slave owners do violence to their slaves, kill their slaves, rape their slaves constantly. It is only right to meet righteous violence, or meet that violence with righteous violence from the Lord, acting through me. How do you view this dude? He's a complicated guy. I mean, even in his time, people in the North, people in the South had very, very different reactions to what he did in Kansas and what he did in Harpers Ferry, Virginia. So do that. I have no wrap-up activity for you. Nothing. Do nothing. I don't want to give you guys too much work. I've already talked longer than I planned on, as per usual. So once you've gotten to this point in the video, be it if you knocked it all out in one day, congratulations. If you've done it in the 2 parts as assigned, that's fine. But turn in your activity sheet. It should have a number, I think like 8. I think you should probably have all 8. Yeah, you should have all 8 of these questions, plus the stuff from the very short Bleeding Kansas video that was assigned a few classes back after I talked about it. It's 2 minutes long, from the History Channel. Do that, get that to me, and you're good to go. I will finish up with lecture number 6. I'll probably knock that all out in one part because it's not a whole lot. We're in 1859. We only need to get to 1860 or so. So we'll knock that out, and then we will finally be on to the Civil War, and we'll finally be killing people. I'll be running through that real quick. I got a lot of information to get to you. I don't expect you to take a ton of notes. Hopefully you get a little from this. Let me know. Reach out. Talk to me. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Seriously, if there's anything I can do for you guys in this time to lessen your stress, to make you feel a little bit better, to make this more educational, anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here. I'm pretty much on my Chromebook feeling worthless from 9 to 3 every day. So if there's anything I can do for you guys, let me know. Truly miss having all of you. Going a little crazy here, but I've gone long. And so I will be signing off now. Have a good one. Take care. Check your grades and everything right. And those activity sheets. I will see you guys shortly. Have a great one.